Over 7 million different animals inhabit our planet.
Now, the Ili Pika lives in the Tian Shan Mountains of northwest China.
What can they teach us?
Researchers think that they might be a canary in the coal mine because of the potential impacts of climate change. They indicate
Many species are in crisis and need your help. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.
Welcome to the All Creatures Podcast. This is Chris.
And I'm Angie.
Angie, this went to the top of my list. You sent me this article and I demanded we do this next, right? This is the cutest damn thing I've ever seen, period.
There was not much twisting my wrist on this one because I couldn't agree more. I am in love. I have a new species crush, and yes. I'm really excited to share it today with our audience because today we are going to be talking about the pika, which there's several species, but we're going to highlight what is known as the Ili Pika or the magic rabbit.
This thing is adorable.
So
it is.
cute.
I love my elephants. I love my honey badgers. I love my immortal jellyfish now. This thing by far is the cutest animal we've covered.
Yes, I think I was talking about snow leopards and clouded leopards as some of the top cutest babies out there. Of course, there's bazillions, but yes, this Ili Pika rises right to the top. And quite frankly, Chris, pikas in general are just very charming. They have they're just cute. All the different species, I think, you just can't look at them without kind of saying, "Oh."
I know. And you know, it's before we jump into anything, and this one's really special because it was just seen a few years ago. It was just seen for the first time in 20 years in China. But I think we need to describe this animal so people that have never heard of a pika understand what we're talking about. It's just, they are so adorable, and it's a small mammal in Asia, and there's actually two in North America, which we're going to get to. But basically, they're like distant cousins to rabbits. They kind of look like rabbits with no tails, right? But they have rounded ears.
Yeah, they're just perfect. They have rounded ears, remind me of a mouse, but they are more perfectly round, I guess, if you will, or they're a little bit, they protrude a little bit more, like Mickey Mouse ears, I suppose. If that's
yes,
accurate.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
and then yes, they don't have a tail. And their fur is dense and fine. It can be anywhere from usually grayish brown. Sometimes they might even have a little bit of reddish brown to their color too. It just depends on the species and where they live. So you just have to go to our show notes and look at them. We're not doing it justice. We're not doing the pika justice in general. Because for a lot of people, it's probably a newish species. Right. Or maybe you've heard of it, but you never really knew. So today you are going to learn everything about pika. Google it or go to our show notes and you will fall in love. And then that's just your normal pika. But when you check out on our show notes and see the pictures of the Ili Pika, you will thank us not once, not twice, probably for the rest of the week. Because Chris, what did you said when we first started talking about this last week? You mentioned it looked like a Ewok.
Ewok, yeah, it looks like it's like a real life Ewok. It just is so cute. They call it the teddy bear face.
Oh, that's right. That's a good description. Teddy bear face. Yeah, its ears are super furry too. Perfectly round ears that are furry, and the ears are like erect, like I said, like Mickey Mouse ears. And then its face is kind of bristly, almost like a teddy bear or a Scottish dog or something.
Yeah,
or a Scottish terrier.
Adorable. You sent me that, and I was like, okay, that's it. They win.
So
it's the cutest thing ever.
And we have some really good ones on the lineup too. And this one jumped far.
straight to
Head.
the front.
Rightfully
That's how
so.
we pick ours. And these ones are endangered, so we're going to get to that. That's there's a host of reasons.
And yeah, Chris, when I was doing research on these guys, I came across this quote that made my jaw hit the ground about the Ili Pika. And it's by the researcher that made them famous. And so if you stick with us, we'll talk more about his work. But what he states is, quote, "I discovered the species and I watched as it became endangered. If it becomes extinct in front of me, I'll feel so guilty." End quote.
Yeah.
And so that's what also encouraged us to get the message out there about the magic rabbit, the Ili Pika, and hopefully make everyone fall in love and understand a little bit more about pikas and their physiology and how they're actually, interestingly enough, a canary in the coal mine with some of this climate change stuff.
Very much.
Stick with us, and because we would definitely want to tip our hats to the scientist that is trying over in China that is working very, very hard to save this magic rabbit from extinction before it's too late.
Yes. They're facing a ton of pressures that we're going to get to. One of the things that I just laughed when I found this out, and I know my son would really appreciate that, but Pokemon is, world renowned, and Pikachu is very famous. He's actually has a movie coming out this year, I think.
Oh, really?
And Pikachu is based on Pikas. So
the younger generation is like, come on, Angie and Chris, of course we know what Pikas are.
Pikas are
interesting.
Pikachu.
Okay.
So I thought that was pretty funny.
He's
gonna
funny.
Get a kick out of that one.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Now, these are actually larger than other species of Pika, so we'll get to that. But they're still little. They're 9 inches long and only weigh about 11 ounces, or 250 grams. So they're not huge. They're
They're
cute,
small
adorable.
Mammals. Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Cute.
Very. Now, the Ili Pika lives in the Tian Shan Mountains of northwest China, which is really, if the upper left corner of China is where they are. And like we're going to get to here in a second, but they really prefer higher elevations, and this is pretty standard for pikas throughout the world, right? So,
well, and you know what, Chris, that's really interesting. So you said the northwest corner. A good friend of mine lived over he's American, Marcus, and he lived over in China for years doing Teach for America, teaching English. And I would always super fascinated by China and the landscapes and the history and the culture, and also trying to understand what part he was living in and teaching in. And he described China, he said it's similar in size to actually the United States. And it can almost, not that you can't transpose it on a map, but it's similar in size and then also somewhat like a little bit similar in climate as well. So that kind of makes sense to me that the northwest corner is going to be cold and rocky. And
you know what? I mean, that's hilarious because I'm looking at my map right now, and the other Pika throughout the world, there's 2 species in North America, and it is, I mean, Angie, they're close to me here in California, so I need to go find Pika and just look
you
at
do.
them.
And if you stick with us too, Chris, surprise for you, I found a group that you might be able to help out with.
Ooh, that'd be awesome. But they are like in the Northwest, in North America. So California, Oregon, Washington, up into British Columbia. And then, then they go over to the Rockies, Utah, Colorado, up that part of the United States.
And these
it's interesting you said that because the 2 species that reside in the United States. Now there are Pika throughout Asia too, in China, Russia, Japan, even down through Nepal. So Pika are all over that part of Asia.
Yeah, there's 30 species. So 2 of them in North America, and then the remaining 28 in Asia, or a little bit into Eurasia too. I read somewhere potentially.
Yeah, Eastern Europe, but they've been kind of pushed out a little bit with the expansion of humans, obviously. Now, the Ili Pika, obviously, they're endangered. They're just, we haven't sold you on how cute they are. I'm sorry. You will.
I don't think we possibly can. I really don't. Obviously, if you're driving, do not get your phone out. But if you're not driving, hit pause with us and bring up another browser.
Well, just look at
Google this. Or show
Just look up the picture of the week.
I mean,
always on our podcast, the picture of the week will be the Pika front
I'm
and center.
sure most people,
the Ili Pika.
I'm sure most people have our homepage, our website, as one of their favorites, right? Like
yes,
on their
of course,
on their phone.
Of course.
All right.
Yes.
You mean our moms who barely know how to use their cell phones?
Yes, yeah, I know. No, my mom's actually pretty good. Like she's over on my computer all the time. But you mentioned earlier, Angie, and I think this is a critical point to make about pikas in general. You said canary in the coal mine, and they absolutely are a species of really looking at the changes in climate change, especially in the alpine, they call it alpine biogeography.
Right.
The changes in temperature, because these things are really sensitive to temperature changes. So scientists are using them as an indicator species, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think this is a good time to point out that in general, pikas live in kind of two main ecotypes. One's associated with rocky habitats that Chris and I have kind of already mentioned as far as the Northwest and the United States and, of course, into Canada. But the other is what they call like meadow, steep forest, shrub habitats. And each ecotype is going to be associated with specific histories and traits and even a little bit more of their phenotypes or how they look. But they are a creature of the North, and they love the North. They've very, very well adapted to it, and we'll touch on that throughout the podcast. And in fact, not only are they suited for the North, but the pikas that live in the ecotype that's mountainous, Chris, they can be found in ranges up to 6,000 meters.
Wow.
Which is, quick math. Of course, I have it on my notes.
Like 20,000 feet? Yeah, it's like
Whoa,
20,000
feet,
look at you.
Right? Yeah. I'd have little notes. But yes, 20,000 feet. I was thinking back. I was really proud of myself. I'm like, oh, I think I did like 8,000 feet one time when I was at Glacier National Park. That's like nothing. That's like nothing. You don't think I did that?
I was having, no, I'm just saying it like, no, thank you. I didn't hike up that.
Well, I thought 7,000 or 8,000 feet was like high. That's not.
I was at a conference in Keystone, Colorado, and I thought I was going to die walking the stairs, and I was like, 20,000 feet. Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, Everest is close to almost 30,000, right? So you're talking Himalayas.
Yeah,
right. Really high.
And
really high.
Yeah, and so they're really well adapted for this mountainous region. Some, like I said, it's actually the large ear. Well, you got it. Yeah, it's the large eared pika of the Himalayas that goes up to that's been recorded at 6,000 meters. So, or even if they're of the more meadow steppe ecotype, they're still in cold weather. Like they are a cold weather critter. Which is actually apropos for this time of year here for my friends in northern North America and Chicago. It's today is seeing
little chilly.
Some historic below sub-zero weather due to some polar vortex.
It's like 50 degrees. Angie, it's 50 degrees here and I'm freezing.
I know.
I'm such a weather wuss.
I know. It's like it's 40 Fahrenheit here and I've got my hot tea and oh my gosh, I actually slept with a heating pad last night, to tell the truth. But John was so funny.
Hey, real quick.
He's like, you need to stop that. That is too much. It's sucking too much energy. I just think he wanted me to
But our friends in
closer.
Australia and New Zealand and down there, it's like 35 degrees C. It is like baking. It's like 40 degrees C almost down there.
And that's the thing that with this whole with climate change is, historically it was called global warming, which was an unfortunate misnomer because I think it could confuse people that, I mean, yes, the overall Earth's temperature is increasing, but because of that, there's going to be crazy shifts in weather, and which means places like Chicago and, places that aren't seeing a lot of sub-zero weather.
They're seeing extremes.
They've seen extremes. Yeah. Exactly. Yes. And so with the Ili Pika or pikas in general, I mean, why should we care? Well, there's lots of reasons we should care. One of the main reasons we should care is because pikas, due to their sensitivity to this temperature and their dependence on sufficient snowpacks and summer vegetation, which we'll talk about when we get to diet, nutrition, and behavior. The American pikas, which are the first one is the American pika, and the second one is the collared pika. Researchers think that they might be a canary in the coal mine because of the potential impacts of climate change. They indicate what is happening with climate change and the way they move and their decline in numbers and how they look for different vegetation and where they, if their range changes, if they're moving further up the mountains to seek more snowpack, things like that will help researchers have better understanding of the impacts on plants, because the pika is an herbivore, which we'll talk a lot about in their nutrition. And they do a lot of storing of different plant materials in these alpine ecosystems. And so learning about how they're changing and what their behavior is doing differently could help us begin to kind of understand what the impacts are going to be to other trickle-down species, especially plants. Like we always, Chris and I, unfortunately, because we're not, to all of our plant lovers out there, all of our plant biologists, we don't really specialize in it. So I think sometimes we forget to talk about the importance of plants. And a lot of the trickle-down effect happens with top predators, lower predators and prey animals. But then it does move into plants. So
seed dispersal.
Yeah.
I mean, just something like simple like seed dispersal. Like it's critical for the biome.
Yeah. So the other interesting thing about a pika, which talking more about plants, any of our plant biologist friends will enjoy this, is that the pikas actually alter which plants they're collecting and how far they will forage depending on what is and what is not readily available. And this, basically this variation really affects the plant community and the composition. So if they're foraging and stockpiling at a very stable rate, that will help the plant community be stable, and it'll slow the process of succession of plants and turnover. And what researchers have found is that this selective foraging of pikas basically can stabilize plant communities and slow processes of succession and even reduce the number of seeds in the soil for different types of plants. So they have a really big impact on the plant community, which is really, really fascinating. I guess I should care more about plants since I love herbivores so much and their impact. And so the reading up on this was just really fascinating me to see kind of the whole big picture.
You capture it beautifully too. Just again, I think, listening to this podcast, to our listeners out there that have been following us, getting the big picture. And something that my eyes have opened is the circle of life isn't just a lion and a zebra. It's not just.
That's not the melody. Disney, I need John here. He would know the melody of the Lion King song, or Anna. The Lion King. Anna would know it.
No,
too,
it's not. Yeah, it's not just they're at the top, but then you do have all these trickle down species. Like pikas, and then you have insects, and then you have the plant community, and then you have the microbe community. I mean, there is, oh my goodness, it is all affected. All of it.
We're all connected, man. We're all connected.
We are.
That's pretty cool.
We are. And so you captured it beautifully, focused on plants. The species of pika, so like Angie said, up to 30 species. These are Lagomorpha, the order, or Lagomorphs.
Our first Lagomorph.
New favorite?
Yes.
Yes, our new favorite. This includes the pika, and then rabbits and hares, which I think this is like mustelids are still one of my favorites. I think the Lagomorphs are just going to be one of my favorites.
Well, I promise you this, listeners and Chris, we are going to do another rabbit or hare in the very near future because I want to learn more about their behavior. I'm going to touch on a lot of the interesting Pika behaviors, but rabbits in general are just really unique and they have some really cool behaviors. So stay tuned. You'll see a lot more. We promise. If you're, and who doesn't love rabbits, right? I mean, I took care of them when I was a keeper at the zoo, and I love them. And they were amazing education animals, and so that's another thing too that people always forget. It's when kids go to a zoo, of course they're. I mean, who isn't blown away by seeing something as majestic as a lion? But all the kids love the fact that they can actually touch a rabbit, if that either at children's zoos or at like farm in the zoo. That's where I worked, and you just get that connection. And some of the city kids that we had worked with had never touched an animal before, let alone a rabbit, a soft, cute little rabbit. So I think everybody has a pretty fond memory or connection, can relate to a rabbit, even if whether it's from a cartoon or getting to pet one. Right. So. Yes. And and some of these species definitely need our help too. So that's what we're going to.
For sure. Now they're the family Ochotonidae. And so the Ili Pika is Ochota. Oh my God, I can't even say this. Ochotona iliensis. I'm good at the ensis part now.
You are doing, I applaud you, Chris. I don't even try. Like, you're my buddy because it's like my weaknesses are your strengths. So I applaud you for even trying. Yes.
What was the one we did, the Mississippiensis?
Oh, whatever it was, I totally slaughtered it. I mean, let's be realistic.
Yeah, Mississippiensis. All right. And then, some of the more common names, Angie already covered the American ones, but in Asia, you have the plateau Pika, the Mupin Pika, the Chinese red Pika, the black Pika, the forest Pika. Just adorable. Now, Angie was talking about the lagomorphs. So just quickly, I thought I would throw this in here, and I know we'll cover it again, but the difference between a rabbit and a hare.
Ooh.
Okay, so since we're covering the family, or the order, I figured we kind of touch upon a little bit on the other ones. Because you always wonder, what's the difference between a rabbit and a hare? And I always kind of knew hares were a little bit bigger, and that's true. They have longer legs, hind legs than rabbits. Their longer ears, and then usually has black markings on that. They eat differently, so they have different things like that. I think this is why you really want to get to it. So rabbits and hares have definitely different social behaviors between the two.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, wait till I get to the Pika. Yeah. There's definitely species difference depending on where they live, exciting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, it is really cool. And then, so rabbits live in burrows, and then hares, they live up topside. They don't go down.
Okay.
Rabbits are very social, where hares aren't. And so we got to cover one. Like, I think like the snowshoe hare or something like that would just be fun, but we'll see what we get to.
Maybe some wonderful, fan can make a request.
Yes, on a special one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always good. My friend Julie, she wants tigers.
Okay.
And then I have a special friend,
Julie,
Bree,
we're
she
working
wants
on
ferrets. So, so
cool.
We've got some, little Bree. She sent me one, and I was like, oh, we love mustelids, but we'll get to it.
Well, we did the black-footed ferret. Would that be enough to tide her over?
Yeah, she did, but she really wants the minks. So I was like, oh, we will cover them.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe cover some hair physiology or something. That'd be kind of cool. Now, Angie, these things are amazing. Again, I mean, every animal we cover, the evolution, now not as ancient as, some of the crocodiles and the alligator, Mississippiensis, that we've covered. But, they've been around for 40 million years. Again, these animals have taken a long time to get where they're at today.
Mm-hmm.
Pikas split off from rabbits and hares about 30 million years ago. And they found Pika fossils in Europe, Asia, North America, not Australia, interestingly enough.
Okay.
And they've even found them in the UK. Yeah, I know. But they actually found some of these Pika fossils in the UK that date back about 3 million years.
Cool.
So, yeah. And then as seas, lowered and risen. We've covered that in many species. Of just the Tasmanian devil one that comes up to my mind that we covered. Now, just guess. I found the largest lagomorph.
Ooh.
How big do you think the largest rabbit / hare / pika was?
I have no idea. But when you said it, for some reason, I just thought of my dog Gypsy, who is like a lab shepherd mutt mix, good 70-pound sized dog. So that, for some reason, I just put bunny ears on her and I thought that would be my guess, that size.
And not quite as big as Gypsy, about half her size.
Okay.
Well, I honestly would have thought I would have found a bigger one.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't get very big.
Yeah.
They just never did. But they did find a species off Spain, off an island of Spain of Menorca. And it lived about 3 million years ago. And it's Neurologus rex. So like big. It's the biggest one they've ever found. Mm-hmm. It only got about 26 pounds. Okay. It wasn't very big.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, it probably comes up to Xander's, I would say, your 4-year-old's waist or chest, maybe that high, 2 feet off the ground, maybe 2.5 feet off the ground. Not very big.
Well, Xander's 5 now.
The reason
he's grown like a sprout.
Yeah, 5 now. Yeah.
Maybe he's more like, because Zachy is about 30 pounds.
Okay. Yeah.
But he's about that size. He's like he's a linebacker for 2.5. He ran up to me today when I picked him up from school. He ran up to me and he like jump hugged me, and I was like in the squat position, and I literally went backwards. I fell backwards towards the door. Yeah, rugby flair, something like that.
Yeah. We'll see. They grow too big. They grow too fast. So they called these roly-poly bunnies. Their vertebrate was fixed, so they couldn't really jump. So they just kind of hopped on the ground. Okay. But they lived on this island with no predators. So they just kind of lazed around, and they just hanging out at the beach. I would love this life. And they were able to get bigger.
Yeah,
and they weren't preyed upon. So there you go. It's interesting. I'm always expecting to find these 10 feet rabbits.
Like of your almost worst nightmares, right?
Yes,
it was like a good dream, but a bad dream. I don't know what to think right now. Well, what I found interesting with here, I'm going to try it just for you, Chris. The Ochotonidae family. That was horrible.
Okay, Ochotonidae. Yeah,
I don't know.
No, it was good.
But they, the Pikas, for lack of a better word, represents a third of the lagomorph diversity. So the 30 species represent about a third. I had no idea that they represented that much in the lagomorph family. I guess I would have had no idea that there are that many Pikas out there. That they had such a rich diversity.
And it's just an animal. I've heard of them before, just never really thought about them. Never really. I
know. That's why this podcast is so awesome, because I learned so much.
I know.
Yeah.
Until you sent me that picture, and I was like, "We're doing that next." Yeah. Period. Yeah. End of story. Yeah. I don't care. Stop the presses. We're doing that animal.
And when I looked at it, though, I was like, "This is fake. This somebody photoshopped this."
Yeah.
That's what I thought. That was my first thing.
No kidding.
And then when I realized
it was jackalope, right?
Yeah. Right. When I realized it was real, I quick was like, well, what's it related to? That's just kind of the evolutionary biologist or wannabe in me. And I actually came more up into raccoon I did not go lagomorph.
No.
You know why though, Chris? Because I was not familiar with Pikas. I think if I had a little bit more education on Pikas and understanding their diversity and their body shapes and their beautiful round Mickey Mouse ears, it would have maybe dawned on, and where they live in these rocky, a lot of them are in these rocky, sloped, mountainous terrain. But anyways.
Yeah, they're amazing. Now, again, being a small mammal, their lifespan is probably on average around 3 years, but they can live up to 7 or 8 in there. And like you mentioned earlier, so some of the physiology stuff that I found is they're a herbivore, which we talked about. About 9 inches, again, we said, long. These ones are the Ili Pika is a little bit bigger. They can run about 15 miles per hour or 24 kilometers per hour. I have a question for you. The fastest lagomorph who would it be and how fast?
Well, probably the jackrabbit.
Yay! Ding, ding, ding. All right. Good job.
Thanks,
Good job.
thanks.
Good job.
That's
yeah,
his name.
It is.
Now, speed, I'm not going to probably get so correct.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
You said Pika's 15. Is that miles or kilometers?
Miles per hour.
Jackrabbit. 30 miles per hour?
Close. Just add another 15, 45.
Oh, wow.
They're pretty fast.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Whoa.
I know. They're pretty fast. They're pretty fast. 45 miles per hour, 72 kilometers per hour. They can go pretty quick, but that was good. It was a good guess though. I wouldn't have guessed that. Now, one of the things you talked about was temperature sensitivity. So anything over 78 degrees Fahrenheit, they really start to suffer. And then that's where, they can end up dying if it gets too hot.
Exactly, Chris. Yeah. Pikas require really cold temperatures to live. Mm-hmm. And these changing temperatures have forced some Pika populations to restrict their ranges to even higher elevations, probably with less food plant choices and things like that. And it's not like, oh, I don't like to be 78 degrees like my husky dog used to be. Mm-hmm. No, I would always shave him and keep him in air conditioning all day long. But because of their physiology, Pikas have really high metabolic rates. And and they have low thermal conductance. So even at moderately high temperatures, so 80 degrees or something that us humans would think is perfect, they have a low ability to dissipate heat, which is really important when you're in a hot climate, right? So, us humans, we can sweat, dogs pant. There's a lot of different ways that species dissipate heat, but the Pika has a really hard time with it. It's just how they evolved. And so therefore they need that cold weather.
Yeah. It's, I just hope it, we combat this and we can get the stuff turned around, because it's just seeing animals like this suffer, and then knowing the plants will suffer, and then the insects will suffer, and then we'll suffer. I mean, it's just sad. Now, I can't wait till we get to behavior. We're going to get there. So they're diurnal, right? So somewhat active in the day a little bit. I think we'll talk about that. But foraging. Now, they do have predators depending on what part of the world they're in, but mostly like hawks and eagles, like here in the States, coyotes, bobcats, I imagine.
Sure. And
clouded leopards, or not snow leopards, would eat them. They could catch them. Yeah.
And talking about the circle of life. Yes. That might be the better melody. It's been a long day. Yes. There you go. But speaking of the circle of life, I mean, one of their ecological niches is that they are a small mammal, and they are part of, as a prey animal, they help feed some of the food chain and some of the predators on top. And I don't want to think of the Ili Pika, or really any Pika, as a snack, but in the same instance, that is a niche they fill for other animals. And so without them, or if they're forced to move to higher elevations because the weather's warming overall, then that's not going to be great for the predators that live in their regions.
I don't know why anytime we talk about small mammals, I still go back to a year ago when we did black-footed ferret. It goes on the prairie dog and tap, tap, tap on the shoulder so it rolls over and then bites its throat. Those poor little Pikas.
Black-footed ferrets do not mess around.
Still that image. I will never get that image out of my head. Great episode, folks, if you haven't heard that one.
And the black-footed ferret is also such a really cool American conservation success story.
It's one of the best.
So of course we have to talk a little doom and gloom here. It's just unfortunate the nature of this podcast, but in general, we like to highlight a lot of successful stories as well. And the black-footed ferret is a really great one. Plus, I got to talk to one of my BFFs from Chicago.
Yes. Yeah, Dr. Sattermeyer. Shout out to her out there, freezing her tushy off right now.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Yes. Yeah, but people of the North, they know when winter is coming. And they know how to dress.
Game of Thrones. Winter is here.
It is here. It's not coming. It's here.
It's here. Like we said, the variety of plants that they eat: grasses, sedges, thistles, all sorts of things.
Flowers. Some pictures.
Flowers. Yes.
I found these beautiful pictures of, I don't know if it's the North American pika or the collared, but they have little purple flowers in their mouth. And it's just the cutest thing you've ever seen. But it's not like being cute, that it actually forages on flowers. As well as grass.
It's a snack. It's yummy. It's yummy. And then but you'll get to this, right? The haystacks that they take and go store it in their dens.
Yes,
so it's like they have
quote
food
unquote
storage.
Pack, like pack rabbits or pack mules or however you want to call it.
You go. Go. Because that is just that thought of just them, having hay in their dens to eat. Like,
it's pretty
going behavior.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I mean, they collect a wide variety of plant matter. And when we use the word hay, Chris and I are familiar with this. Hay just in the horse world means grass that's been dried. So there's all different types of grasses that horses eat. There's cold season grasses here in North America. And then down here in Florida where I'm at, our horses graze on warm season grasses, which is fresh and has a lot of moisture. Well, you cut it and you dry it and you bale it and it becomes hay. So everybody thinks of hay and horses. So it was really full circle, really funny when I was reading, and the terminology with pikas, especially the rock dwelling pikas, they store their own quote unquote hay pile of dried vegetation, while the burrowing species that live more like in the meadows, they often share food stores and have hay piles that they share with their mates or their friends, which is another kind of cute visual for me for some reason. So, and so pikas, especially the rock dwelling pikas, store its own hay pile of all this dried vegetation that they've collected during the spring and summer season. Now, the burrowing counterpart, or the meadow dwelling alpine steppe type pika, they don't do haying as often. They store food, but they do a lot of food sharing and things like that. So they're not going to get as big of quote unquote hay pile as the.
And they dry it. Like, oh my gosh, these things.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
It's like,
they're little farmers.
I know. I want to train my horse to do that. Like, can you cut a whole bunch of grass, set it off to pick it? So I mean, think about what they're doing from an animal's point of view. Is they're actually, they're using their front incisors. They grab it, and then instead of eating it, that takes some self-control. They're like putting it off to this. They're like carrying it back to their, their little like creche or their little shelter
ledge
that they have, or the little rock den that they have in these mountainous areas, and just letting it dry, and then knowing, that they have the wherewithal to know that it's going to be cold in months to come, and there's not much vegetation. So it's pretty crazy. And with that being said too, though, it's important to note that no species hibernate. So a lot of times we talk about bears that hibernate, or everybody knows hibernate, where their metabolism slows down during the colder months. And some of these species will live off their fat storage, just for because when it's cold outside, there's not much food to find. But pikas don't do that. They don't. I mean, they're like totally fine with the cold. They're like loving it.
Yeah.
And they have the dense fur, fine dense fur to deal with it. But they know that food's scarce. So they've got their hay pile, man, and they're just like munching on their hay pile throughout the winter to get by. So it's just, I mean, and of course their peak activity is going to be just before the winter months, when they really are, spending a lot of time collecting and storing food. And I don't know how they know how much. I'd be very interested in that. Like, do they are they like me and oversupply the refrigerator, and then, or are they it's really cool. I don't know if researchers know that.
That's such an amazing behavior for a small mammal. Like, it's just amazing behavior. It's really cool.
And the other behavior that I want to mention, so if you don't like feces, you might want to turn the dial down on the old
Angie's
podcast
favorite
dial. I love myself some feces, especially herbivore feces. And pikas also like feces. And so similar to their cousin, the rabbit, after eating, they initially produce a softer green feces, which is just this wonderful hay that they've been, that's why I don't have a problem with horse poop or cow poop, or Pika poop or rabbit poop, because it's pretty much just chewed up grass. Pika poo.
Yes.
Pika poo.
There you go.
Is like it's just like chopped up grass. It's, it's totally fine. But so what they do is they produce this soft green feces, which they actually eat again to take in further nutrition before producing a final solid fecal pellet. And so everybody who's not familiar with this behavior in rabbits is probably like, huh? And as a rabbit keeper, it's really important in understanding their physiology that us keepers, people that care for animals, a lot of us tend to love to clean, a little type A, and want to keep the animal's habitat very, very clean. But with rabbits, you just have to make sure that they do have a little access to their feces. If you just don't want to clean their cage like 5 times a day, once a day, that gives them more than enough time to find that fresher feces it's still basically full of a lot of really important vitamins and minerals that have the body, because of their high metabolic rate, they're not necessarily able to take the time. They have a very fast transit time from, basically that's like when you eat something, it goes down your esophagus, through your stomach.
Quickly. Yeah.
It goes through really quickly. And so the rabbits miss out on a lot of vitamins and minerals that could be absorbed. And their bodies are so smart that they know this. And so they've developed this behavior to basically recycle the food and get the most nutrients out of it. And so a rabbit can actually get really sick if you basically don't let it have access to these first soft green feces. So don't kiss your rabbit on the lips at home.
No.
Or a Pika, I guess, for that matter, because yes, you don't know if they just ate their fresh feces. But it's very, very important, and it's not gross because it's just like a green ball of grass. So that's my poop story for the day. My Pika poo story.
All right. Pika poo. I like that one.
And now, Chris, regarding their social behavior, it depends. And this is what fascinates me about these guys. And I went down the rabbit hole, pardon the pun, a little bit, but I didn't have as much time as I would like to. And so this is why I would like to study a little bit more as far as lagomorph or rabbit or hare or Pika, basically social behavior. So the species in North America that live primarily like in the Rocky Mountainous areas, they are somewhat independent, and they will defend their territory, especially against members of the same sex. They'll, of course, come together and get along to mate, but the North American ones are relatively asocial for the most part. Now, the Asian Pikas that live in the rocks, they team up, and I think I read somewhere too that can even be monogamous. They'll team up and defend their territory in pairs. And they spend a lot of their time in the same area. They store their hay together, his and her. There's no his and her hay pile. They put it together.
Yes.
And they communicate with a lot of vocalizations, which I'll touch on in a minute. But they're asocial outside of their pairing. Okay. So North America, leave me alone. Asia and the rocks, I like you, but anybody else, no, thank you. Yeah. Now, in contrast, the Asian Pikas that dwell more in the meadows are considered highly social family groups. They consist of adults as well as young. They have communal burrows, right? Because they don't have the mountains to hide in the crevices, so they have more of a burrows. They live at much higher densities than the rock. Their cousins, the rock Pikas. And they have, this would be, if you're doing a behavior study, probably want to and you get to pick your graduate project, you probably want to pick the meadow pikas because they seem to have a lot more like affiliative behaviors. And affiliative is just a fancy word for social, right? They'll do some allo grooming or mutual grooming where they groom each other, nose rubbing, and they basically will defend their family, their territories together as a family. And then they have a huge family hay pile too sometimes. So I just found that was really interesting because I don't know if we've seen that in other species where if there's multiple species that they have such drastic social behaviors depending on where they live. And of course, it's probably evolved over time for different reasons. But yeah, I want to learn more. And I don't know. I don't know with rabbits. I need to brush up on my small mammal behavior, ecology and physiology. I've been doing these big herbivores, these megafauna herbivores for so long. So yeah, it's just really, really cool. And now I have a new project and I want to come with you out to Colorado or Northern California to study these guys.
Yes.
But what you also probably don't know, Chris, knowing that the pika is a cousin of the rabbit, do you think they're like highly vocal or not very vocal at all?
Oh, I'm pretty sure they're vocal because I think I saw it. I didn't listen to the videos. I'm like, oh, Angie better cover this of their calls and stuff. I think they've got to be, right?
Oh,
right?
Yes. Because I guess I worked with rabbits. Rabbits are pretty quiet. I mean, like if a rabbit vocalizes it means something. It's pretty
it's bad. Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, it's pretty rare. But once again, I don't want to talk too much about rabbits and hares because I haven't studied it and I clearly don't know. But pikas have distinct calls, almost like a dialect, not so much, but I mean, just they vary in duration. They can be short, quick, longer, drawn out. They have songs. Incredible. Okay. And the calls are distinct. When I say dialect, that's a little bit maybe of an over exaggeration, but the calls are distinct due to geographic variation. So that's maybe where dialect comes more in. And the pikas can determine what kind of call to make back to a pika that it's calling to. And these vocalizations are used to recognize individuals, predator warnings, territory defense, and then, of course, as a mating call to attract the opposite sex. One study, researchers reported that their calls within family groups differed per season. So I guess, they have like summer calls and winter calls and probably like, oh no, winter is coming.
Yeah. No, they're excited about it, right?
Yeah, they're probably excited. They're like rolling in their hay pile, like I'm ready, you know. I just, with these little guys, it just the diversity of small mammals. We just need to cover more of them. That's my final answer because it's really interesting. And well, here, Chris, I'll give you a little example of a pika vocalization. Stand by. But yeah, Chris, as you can hear, it's high pitched and there's some chirps and there's more like shrieks. And so, and that was just a touch of all the different types of calls. So pretty amazing amounts of communication for just a little guy.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that is the problem with them with conservation is low reproductive rates, right? Not only we'll get to the Ili Pika specifically, but pikas, unlike say rabbits, right? Like everybody, the old, ha joke is breeding like rabbits because rabbits reproduce so quickly. And I know our friends in Australia, that's a big problem down there. Rabbits are everywhere because they just exploded. So, what's the generation interval on them, and how do they reproduce?
Right. Well, you bring up a really good point. We all think of rabbits as rapidly producing and things like that, but with pikas, it's much different, and especially so. For example, the American pika, they have really low annual production rate of offspring. They will typically only produce a litter that is maybe only 1 to 5 offspring a year. And that doesn't include, I wasn't able to find any like mortality rate of if that one a year, let's say on the low end, if that one offspring a year actually then makes it to, adulthood. I couldn't find those numbers. So, but in contrast, the meadow dwelling species, they tend to have a higher reproductive output, but it can vary incredibly on environmental conditions, right? Which is what we're talking a lot about in this podcast today with climate change. And so they can kind of double that. They'll produce litters that are, twice as large a couple times a year throughout the season. So they have potentially a lot higher output. But a lot of the rocky ones, but a lot of the species that live in the rocky regions, like the Ili, maybe 1 to 5 young a year.
Not a lot. Definitely not a lot.
No. And then these juveniles, it takes them about a year to sexually mature. So that's not too long. But they have breeding season depending on where they live. But it's usually, of course, makes sense like in late April to, of course, into July. And they're only, their gestation period's about, of course, it varies a little bit for the species, but it's going to be about a month. So that way they can get the offspring on the ground while the weather is still nice. Or if you're a meadow dwelling pika, you might have a couple different litters throughout the breeding season, if you're lucky. So when baby pikas, pika pups, I don't know what baby pikas are called. I should know this. Chris, quick, look it up while I'm talking. When pikas are born, they have a little bit of hair and their eyes are closed and they have teeth. And so they're usually weaned by about 6 weeks and they're only 75 grams, which is just super cute. And their first adult behaviors are going to be seen when they're about 3 months old, and they'll scent mark and alarm call. And when the mother does wean them, there will be a little bit more maternal aggression as the young keeps trying to nurse, but eventually the offspring will be fully weaned. And depending on if they're more of a rocky dwelling, asocial type pika, that's about it. But if they're a little bit more of the meadow dwelling type pika, they may continue to live in their parental territory for at least the first year, if not longer. And Chris, we joke a lot on this podcast about parents and deadbeat dads. Has come up on different times. I didn't find too much about
not the sea dragon, not the sea dragon,
right? Not sea dragon.
The one of the 70 we've covered, the sea dragon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, award-winning dads there, for goodness sakes. And I couldn't find too much about the paternal role of pikas in the parenting. But the maternal pika behavior is interesting. In some rocky species, not necessarily in the meadows, the super social ones, but in the rocky species, some of the moms exhibit what's called absentee maternal care. And this sent me down a rabbit hole. Ha ha ha, pardon the pun. It never gets old. Bada bing, bada boom.
Yeah.
Never gets old. But what this is, and this is why I want to cover more rabbit species, is in lagomorphs, in certain species of lagomorphs or rabbits, moms kind of get a bad rap for being deadbeat moms. Now, and what's been reported is that they only nurse their young a couple times a day. They don't stay with their young. And that's where they get this absentee maternal kind of title. But and some of the pikas, the rocky dwelling pikas have this. But it's really interesting, Chris, because the more I dug into it, and I didn't give it the due time that it deserves, so I want to look into this more. But researchers actually believe that it's not a deadbeat parenting behavior, that the moms are actually doing this absentee maternal care because they know that their what are baby rabbits called? Did we figure that out?
It's kits. Baby
Kits.
rabbits are kits.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. So the kits, what would I do without you? But so they leave their kits in their burrow or maybe their hay pile or whatever it is, knowing that they're going to snuggle together and that they'll be warm and they're cared for. And of course they come nurse them a couple times a day or whatever it is in quick bouts. But researchers believe it's not really absentee maternal care. It's potentially protective behavior. If the further they stay away from their newborn babies, that the less they draw attention to them from predators. Mm-hmm. So if they were with them all day, on the beach, laying around, nursing them every 5 seconds, on demand, this and that, which some species of pikas do. A lot of them do it, the meadow-dwelling ones, that it would potentially make them more susceptible to prey. So researchers still don't totally know, but we found a semi-deadbeat mom, but I want to say no. No. There's some kind of evolutionary advantage to it. Yes. So, and some researchers actually reported that when they were studying the quote unquote deadbeat absentee maternal rock dwelling pikas, that they did actually come nurse like 10 times a day, or a lot more than was previously thought or reported. And so I think they need to clear up the data on this. And as far as the Ili Pika, guys, we don't know.
Nothing. There is nothing.
We're trying to, the researchers there in China are desperately trying to find them again in the wild. And they need your help. And I know it seems very hard to help a small mammal in China that lives in the Rocky Mountains of China, and there's only maybe 1,000 of them left. Maybe.
Yeah.
How do you help them? Well, you help them by education, by sharing this podcast or the articles that we're going to put on our show notes, or just talking to them. Just put a picture as your screensaver on your phone and be like, hey, let's save this magic rabbit. And then that'll lead into a conversation of like, well, what is that? And then you're going to say, it's a Pika. And they're going to be like, what? And then you're going to say, it's like a cousin to a rabbit. And then boom, you just did what Chris and I did.
There you go. I mean, that's a good lead into conservation. I mean, and you're right. There's not a lot known because they were only discovered in 1983. And the estimate in the early 1990s was 1,000 to 2,000 individuals. They haven't been seen for 20 years. Now they've seen them again. And luckily, the scientist who we're going to cover has just beautiful, gorgeous pictures of these animals. So that is what put them on the news, which is great, which is really great. But we do know their population's decreasing, severely fragmented. Still trying to identify the threats. I mean, pollution's a big one. Obviously climate change, we've covered that. Grazing pressure in that part of China from domestic livestock.
Mm-hmm. And China does consider them an endangered species, so that's good.
Yeah. Yes. And low population densities, so, they're spread out, and low reproductive rates, which we covered. So they're facing quite a bit. One
to 5 offspring a year on a good year. So, and there's several species of pikas that are doing great and they're not endangered. But there's at least 4 species: the silver pika, the Hoffman's pika, the Ili Pika, and the Kozlov pika, that are classified as endangered or critically endangered due to habitat loss, poisoning, climate change, as of 2011 by the IUCN. So, and of course, many subspecies are threatened due to basically, all of these effects we've been talking about.
Yeah. So who's out there fighting for the little Pika?
So, Chris, I found a group called Front Range Pika Project, and they can be found on Facebook. Okay. And they're in North America. So any of our European listeners or Asian listeners out there, if there are some groups in Asia, I would love to highlight them. But yeah, this one's in North America, and they can be found at www.pikapartners, charismatic.org, or they've got a great Facebook page at Front Range Pika Project, and we'll put the link in our show notes. But it's basically, Chris, a citizen science program. So it's right up your alley, my alley, or anybody who's like, how do I help this cute little critter? And what they do is they engage in public conservation research on the American Pika. And the volunteers help boost more understanding about Pika by collecting data on their alpine habitat. The Front Range Pika Project was created and it's managed by the group called Rocky Mountain Wild and the Denver Zoo, with assistance from Pika researchers. Like, I didn't know Pika researchers, these are the people I need to meet. We got to find some to interview. I know. Pika researchers at the University of Colorado, great school. I had some friends go there. And they work in collaboration with other regional citizen science to collect basically consistent, rigorous, and usable data on pikas across Colorado. And here, Chris, we see once again the Denver Zoo, a zoo partnering with universities and researchers and nonprofit groups to help wild pikas out and learn more about their numbers and collecting data on them, which is really important as we move into this, 21st century of global climate change. So I want to give them a shout out. Check out Front Range Pika Project at pikapartners.org or find them on our show notes. They have great stuff for you as a listener to potentially get involved with, especially if you're out west, right? Otherwise, you can share the information from their Facebook page and just help educate people on pikas.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're awesome. So conservation tips this week, Angie. So I'm thinking, okay, we're talking about hay and so I thought yard. Let's talk about the yard and our lawns and things like that. If you do have a lawn that you water, you should water it during the cool, windless hours. You don't want to water it in the middle of the day when it's hot because that's water evaporation. And so usually in the evening hours when it cools down is when you want to water that lawn. Now, when it's warmer in the time of year, don't let your grass grow a little bit taller in hotter weather. So again, we're working really towards water conservation, especially in the United States, out west. That's a big topic all the time. But other places, in Australia and things like that, where they're experiencing lots of droughts, things like that. Use mulch. You should always mulch your beds, your flower beds, your plants and things like that, because that helps save moisture in the soil. It's always good. And it looks pretty, always mulch out front. And the other thing is plant native or other shrubs that are, a little drought tolerant, those that require less. You don't need cactus everywhere, but I don't think how would cactus do in Florida,
No, and a lot of times your local university, your land grant universities in your state will have wonderful resources on what to plant, when to plant them, what species do well in your backyard, front yard, whatever. So
and our listeners in Europe, they have very similar programs in their countries. We have a pretty big following in the UK and France. And
we have
and
some.
Sweden.
This week, I think our Australian numbers doubled, if not tripled, from 1 to 3. I think.
It was Lee. Lee got his girlfriend or wife or whoever to listen.
He got his parents listening.
You listen. They said my name in there. All right, Lee. We'll keep saying your name every week. You're our Australian contingent down there.
For a freak. Is that okay?
I know. Yeah, we got a few hundred down there in good old Australia, and we're still getting good numbers from New Zealand. So Angie opened with a quote, and I just want to talk about, he's a conservationist, Li Weidong. He is the one that discovered the Ili Pika. He actually named it after his hometown, where he's from in China. And what Angie said, he retired in 2007 to focus exclusively on this species. And the World Wildlife Fund?
He first observed it in 1983.
And so he's getting grants, and World Wildlife Fund's been a big one. And he spent more than 32,000 American dollars so far over the past 3 decades just to raise funds for them. And he's just an incredible human being. Like, that's why I love these interviews that we do. highlighting these people that are out there fighting.
He needs like a GoFundMe.
Yeah. Like it's just
like a GoFundMe maybe.
It is amazing, amazing work that he's doing. And again, how one person, so for the listeners, if you don't think you can make a difference, you can. You absolutely can. When Angie and I started this podcast, we're like, we're going to make a difference and we're going to try our hardest to make a difference. And I think we're doing it. You can make a difference. And I know we have lots of keepers and conservation friends that are making a difference. We have a wildlife veterinarian there, right there in Gainesville, Dr. Cottrell, working hard with bat conservation and the things that she does. So, lots of you, thank you for listening. You're wonderful. Share this picture that we're going to post with the Pika, and people are going to wonder what in the heck is that thing, because it is the most adorable looking face you've ever seen.
It is. It really is. It should get you excited about animals in general and then conservation. So please enjoy the Ili Pika, all species of Pika, all creatures great and small. And I'm so glad we got to talk about a small mammal today.
Yes. And we've got great ones coming up. So thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Okay, have a great night.
Listen, learn, share. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.